In the concrete jungles of modern Asia, beneath the hum of neon lights and the quiet hum of elevators rising into midnight, some names should never be spoken. Some doors should never be opened. But we forget, we always forget. And the spirits we leave behind, they don't forgive. Welcome to Ghosts of Asia, where ancient curses cling to glass walls, where forgotten rituals echo through apartment hallways, and where the dead still knock even when there's no one left to answer. Tonight, we bring you a story of echoes, identity, and a voice that calls from the other side of memory. This is the voice in Unit 5C. Don't answer the intercom, no matter who calls. The rain fell in long, glassy threads against the windows of the high-rise as Neera unlocked the door to Unit 5C. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paint, sterile, soulless, like most new buildings in central Bangkok. Still, it was quiet, and that was what she wanted. The agent had looked surprised when she said yes to this unit. "Most people don't like the 5th floor," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's unlucky, you know. 5 sounds like death. Some people are superstitious." Neera wasn't, or at least she thought she wasn't. She moved in with little more than a suitcase, her video editing laptop, and a roll of blackout curtains. Her last place had been a shoebox near the BTS line, where every night was a war of horns and foot traffic. But here, silence, almost too much. Unit 5C was sleek, all white and chrome, with automated blinds and voice-controlled lights that responded after a half-second delay. The intercom system on the wall was an older model, oddly analog for such a modern building. A small screen with a cracked edge and a buzzer that looked like it hadn't been pressed in years. She barely noticed it. She was too tired. That night, she unpacked while listening to an old podcast. Rain drummed on the glass, soft and even. The city below glittered, smeared in reflection. As she pulled out her editing headphones and plugged them in, she thought to herself, "This is the first time in months I've actually felt still." At 11:30 p.m., there was a knock on the door. 3 short raps, then silence. Neera froze. No one knew she'd moved in yet. The agent had left hours ago. She walked to the peephole and looked out. An old woman stood there, thin, with silver hair combed back tightly. Her shoulders were hunched, and she held something in her hands, a small tray with incense and a flower. She didn't knock again, just stood, waiting. Neera opened the door a few inches. "Sorry, did you need something?" The woman looked up, her face worn but sharp. She spoke with the calm clarity of someone used to giving warnings. "You live here now?" she asked. Neera nodded. "In 5C?" "Yes." The woman stared at her for a moment longer and then held out the tray. "Take it, light it by the door, every night before you sleep." Neera blinked. "Why?" "So she doesn't knock." "Who?" The woman didn't answer. She just bowed, not in a neighborly way, but in a formal, ritualistic motion, and walked back down the hall, barefoot on the tile. Neera stood there confused, the incense already beginning to burn. The scent was thick, clove and jasmine, and something older. She set it just inside the door and closed it, brushing off the chill that had settled over her shoulders. She told herself it was nothing, just an overly superstitious neighbor, probably lonely. Still, she left the tray by the door. The next morning, the building was brighter, more alive. She saw a few residents in the elevator, a young couple, an office worker, a boy in school uniform. No sign of the old woman. When she asked the front desk about her, the manager squinted. "There's no one elderly living on your floor, miss. Just you." "What about the woman across from 5C? "That unit's been empty for years, miss." That night, as she edited a wedding video for a client, she noticed something odd in the audio. A whisper. She scrubbed back, thinking it was a background murmur from the ceremony, but it didn't sound like Thai. It didn't sound like any language she knew, and it didn't match the waveform. A breath, then, "I'm cold." Neera pulled off her headphones. The room was still. Her eyes drifted to the intercom screen. It was off, but something about it made her uneasy, like it had just stopped glowing, like it had just been used. At 2:13 a.m., the buzzer rang. Not a knock, not her door. The intercom. A single sharp tone, then silence. Neera stared at it from across the room. Her skin prickled. The screen was dark. She stood slowly, walked to it, and hovered her hand above the button. Another ring. Her finger touched the answer key. The screen flickered to life, gray static, low buzzing, no one there. But the audio hissed to life. "Let me in." A girl's voice, soft, desperate. Neera slammed the button, cutting the feed. She didn't sleep that night. In the morning, she convinced herself it was a glitch, a neighbor playing around. She even posted on the building's line chat group, asking if anyone else had gotten a random intercom buzz the night before. No one replied. The thread disappeared within minutes. That evening, she saw the old woman again. This time, the old woman didn't bring incense. She simply stood at the end of the hallway, hands clasped, as Neera left her apartment to get groceries. "Don't answer again," the old woman said. "What is this? Who are you?" The woman took a long breath, her voice lower now, almost shaking. "There is no intercom. It was disconnected after she died." "Who died?" "The girl in the rain." Neera went to the front desk the next day. "Is there something wrong with the intercom system?" she asked. The clerk, a young man half asleep, shrugged. "They haven't worked in years. We use the app now. Why?" "Mine rang last night, twice." He looked up, frowning. "No way. They were all shut down after that accident." "What accident?" "5th floor, long time ago. Some girl, I don't know, jumped or something. I think she lived in your unit, actually." That night, the intercom rang again. Exactly 2:13 a.m. This time, Neera didn't move. She didn't answer. She sat in bed, clutching the old incense tray she hadn't burned again. The screen glowed dimly across the room, casting light like a dying eye, and though she hadn't touched it, though the system wasn't even supposed to work, the screen blinked on by itself, and a voice whispered once more, "Please, let me in." The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. It clung to the city like a second skin, not heavy enough to flood, but constant. A soft, whispering drizzle that never really left. By the third night, Neera stopped checking the forecast. The gray sky felt permanent now, as though the world had decided on gloom and wouldn't change its mind. Inside Unit 5C, she sat at her desk, headphones on, editing footage from a birthday party she didn't attend. Children laughed, balloons popped, bright colors filled the timeline. But the moment she hit play, her skin crawled. In the middle of the laughter, there it was again. That voice, a whisper that didn't belong. Under the ambient music, beneath the chatter, something breathed. "Let me in." Neera yanked off the headphones. She replayed the clip. Nothing. She checked the waveform. Clean. No extra channel, no spike, no anomaly. But she had heard it. Not just heard, felt it like breath at the back of her neck. Later that night, she took a long, hot shower and left the bathroom door open, afraid to be closed in. The air steamed around her. The mirror fogged over, but not fully. A shape lingered at the edge of the frame, not her own. It moved differently, slow, jerky. When she wiped the glass, the shape was gone. 2:13 a.m. The intercom rang. Not just a buzz this time, a low, distorted chime, drawn out, almost ceremonial. She didn't answer. She stayed in bed, eyes locked on the glowing screen from across the room. It clicked on by itself. The camera feed showed the hallway outside her door. The picture was grainy, washed in gray. At first, it looked empty. But then, movement. A dark shape emerged from the left side of the screen, slow, unsteady. A girl stood outside her door. Not a child, not quite a woman. Soaked, rain dripping off her sleeves, her hair long, plastered to her face. She didn't look up. Her head remained bowed, chin to chest. She didn't knock. She didn't speak. She simply stood, still, until the feed cut out. The next morning, Neera checked the hallway. Dry. No footprints, no water, no one. But when she returned inside, she noticed something strange. The incense tray by the door had been knocked over, and the flower, the one the old woman had given her, was gone. Not wilted, not crumbled, gone. She called the building management. A different woman answered this time, younger, polite. Neera asked if there were cameras in the hallway outside Unit 5C. She hesitated, then said softly, "No, not anymore. The last ones were removed years ago. There were issues." What kind of issues? Footage that didn't match reality. We don't like to talk about it. That day, Neera stayed out. She went to a cafe and tried to work, but her thoughts spiraled. She searched online for anything she could find about the building. A few property reviews, one blog post from an expat complaining about thin walls, and one thread on a Thai ghost story forum. Old, archived. Title: Seeing got odd, Don Ti Song. The doorbell at 2 a.m. One user described an experience in Bangkok condo where an intercom rang nightly at 2:13, always showing a girl in a school uniform, soaked to the bone. Another comment: Don't live in 5C. She still waits outside. The thread ended there. No replies. No closure. That evening, Neera returned just before dark. In the elevator, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. She looked pale, exhausted. Her eyes had a sunken quality that hadn't been there 3 days ago. When the elevator reached the 5th floor, the lights flickered. Only once. She told herself it was nothing. She didn't see the shape just outside the frame of the mirror. She didn't see it follow her. Back in her unit, she locked the door and placed a chair under the handle, just in case.
She lit the incense again, even though she had no fresh flowers. The scent calmed her, until she noticed that the smoke curled unnaturally, not upward, but sideways, toward the door, like it was being pulled, like something was breathing in. She unplugged the intercom. She watched herself do it, yanked the power cable clean from the wall. The screen went black. She exhaled, relief flooding through her. She went to bed early, wrapped in thick blankets, her back to the screen. At 2:13 a.m., the screen came back on, powerless, still glowing. Buzz, buzz. A soft voice echoed from it. Not a whisper this time, a plea. "Please, I know you hear me. Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." Neera sat up. The air was freezing. She looked at the unplugged cable, still disconnected. She walked to the screen. The feed showed the hallway, but this time the girl was closer, standing directly in front of the door, still facing down, hair covering her face, hands hanging limp at her sides, but her fingers twitched as if resisting something. Neera leaned in closer. On the screen, the girl raised her head slowly, only for a second, and even through the static, she saw it. It was her face, staring back, mouth open, eyes wide, not crying, not blank, screaming, but no sound came through. Then the screen went black. Neera didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table until morning, light creeping through the blinds. The intercom stayed dark the rest of the night, but her apartment felt wrong. The silence had changed. It no longer felt peaceful. It felt like a pause, like the air was holding its breath, like something was waiting for her to speak first. When the sun finally rose, she packed a small bag and left. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't care. She just knew she couldn't stay another night in Unit 5C. But as she reached the elevator, the doors opened before she pressed the button. No one inside. She stepped in. The lights flickered again. As the doors closed, she saw the old woman standing at the end of the hallway. Mouth moving, no sound. Only 3 words formed. "Don't let her."
The cafe Neera escaped to was all glass and chrome, crowded with students and office workers pretending to work. It smelled of espresso and cheap air freshener. Familiar, noisy, safe. Here she could pretend that nothing followed her, that the walls of Unit 5C didn't remember her name. She sat in the corner, facing away from the window, sipping an iced coffee that was mostly melted. Her laptop sat open, untouched. She hadn't slept, not really. Her body trembled with fatigue, but her mind wouldn't slow down. The girl on the screen, the voice that sounded like hers, the way the intercom came back to life without power. And worst of all, the scream, silent but unmistakable. She tried to rationalize. Maybe she was overworked. Maybe the stress was distorting things. She'd read about sleep paralysis, audio hallucinations, residual data in electronics. But none of that explained how the intercom worked when unplugged. None of it explained why the flower vanished, or why her neighbor, if she even was real, had warned her twice. So Neera opened a blank document. She typed, "The girl in the rain," just to see how the words felt in her hands. Her fingers hovered. Something about the phrase felt inherited, as if it had been said before, as if it belonged to someone else's story, or perhaps her own, a version she hadn't lived yet.
Back at the apartment, the hallway felt colder than usual. She hesitated before unlocking her door. Even with the sun still up, the entrance to Unit 5C cast a shadow that didn't match the light. She turned on every light inside: TV, music, kettle, noise to drown out whatever had claimed the silence. She even spoke aloud to herself, just to prove she still had a voice. But as night approached, the light faded too quickly, and the feeling came back. That sensation of being watched, but not from outside, from inside, as if something had never left since the last time it spoke. At 2:13 a.m., the intercom screen blinked on. Neera didn't move. She watched from the far end of the room, curled in her armchair, blanket pulled tight. The hallway feed appeared. The burl was there again. This time, not facing the door. Not quite. She stood slightly to the side, her face turned just enough that Neera could see her profile. Her soaked uniform clung to her body. Her hair hung heavy across her cheek, and her hands were pressed gently against the doorframe. Not knocking, just resting, like she was tired. The intercom buzzed once. The screen began to flicker, static lines slicing across the image. But for a moment, it cleared, and Neera saw her clearly. The girl's face. Still mostly hidden, still blurred at the edges. But one thing stood out: her school uniform. Neera stared. The logo on the chest, the ribbon, the skirt color. It was from her old school, a private academy on the outskirts of the city, a place she hadn't thought about in years. She knew that uniform. She had worn that uniform. And the longer she looked, the more details aligned. Same length of ribbon, same crest, same stitching along the collar. But what froze her completely, what made her chest tighten, was the shape of the girl's face. Not exact, not quite, but so close. The next morning, Neera searched through her old photos. She had deleted most years ago, but an old cloud folder held a few class pictures. She scrolled until she found it. An old group photo from her second to last year. Rows of girls in uniform, smiling awkwardly. She stared at herself in the photo, or at least the person she used to be. Then she scanned the rest of the faces. And there, third row, far right, a girl with long hair, half smiling. Same uniform, same height, but something about her eyes. Hollow, unfocused. She clicked the file info. The girl's name? Neera Sangantham. Her own. Except that couldn't be. She didn't remember being in that row. She didn't remember that day at all. And that girl didn't look like her. She looked like the girl in the rain. Neera called an old classmate, Pim. They hadn't spoken in years, but the voice was familiar, warm. Pim sounded surprised to hear from her. Neera asked gently, "Hey, do you remember a girl from our class named Neera Sangantham?" There was a long pause. Then Pim said quietly, "You mean the girl who died?" "Died? Yeah, after midterms, remember? She jumped from the 5th floor. They tried to keep it quiet." Neera's throat tightened. "Wasn't her name the same as mine?" "No. Wait, maybe similar? I don't know. She was quiet, strange. Hey, why are you asking about her?" "No reason," Neera said, but her hands were shaking. That night, she lit the incense again. This time, she placed a photo beside it, The class picture, cropped to show only the girl in the third row. She whispered softly, "Who are you?" The incense smoke curled straight up. For the first time, it didn't move toward the door. But at 2:13 a.m., the intercom rang. Neera didn't answer. She closed her eyes, but the voice came anyway from her headphones, left unplugged on the desk. "Let me in. It's raining. I'm cold. You remember me. You know my name. Don't you?" Neera covered her ears, buried her face in the pillow, but the voice was inside her mind now. It wasn't angry. It was tired. Grieving. A girl left outside too long, forgotten too easily. At dawn, she walked to the hallway mirror, the one beside the elevator. She stared at herself. Her face looked thinner, her skin pale, and her reflection blinked half a second out of sync. She lifted her hand slowly. So did the reflection, but too slow, slightly delayed, as if catching up, as if learning how to be her again.
Neera stopped trusting mirrors after that. She draped a towel over the bathroom one, turned the hallway mirror to face the wall, closed her laptop unless she needed it, just to avoid catching her reflection in the black glass. But it didn't help. She still saw her, not always clearly, just flickers, a shadow moving when she didn't, a hand still raised when she had already lowered hers. The echo of a girl who wore her face but only got it mostly right. She didn't tell anyone. What could she say? I think I'm being watched by a ghost who looks like me? Or worse, I think I am the ghost? The line between memory and imagination had already begun to blur. And the strangest part wasn't the voice. It wasn't the intercom or the girl in the rain. It was the creeping doubt that maybe she had forgotten something crucial about her own life, something that had been quietly erased, like a name scratched off an old photo. She returned to the class picture that afternoon. The digital copy had changed. The image resolution was the same, the metadata unchanged. But in the background, near the stairwell behind the rows of girls, a new shape appeared. Faint, distant, a figure standing half in shadow. Not posed, not smiling, just watching. And though the face was too blurred to identify, the posture was unmistakable. It mirrored her own. Same shoulder tilt, same curve of the hands, but reversed, like a reflection in water. That night she dreamt of a stairwell, wet tile, flickering lights, a uniform soaked through with rain. She stood at the top, looking down, or maybe she was looking up at herself. The stairs warped, twisting into spirals. The echo of her own footsteps chased her, though she wasn't moving. When she turned, a girl stood at the bottom of the stairs, not facing her, head bowed, hair matted to her face. Neera tried to speak, to call out, to ask her name, but she had no voice. And the girl began to climb, slowly, step by step, until their faces were nearly touching. The girl looked up and whispered, "You forgot me." She woke up gasping. Her bed sheets were soaked, not with sweat, but water, cold, pooled at her ankles, dripping from the edges of the mattress. Rainwater. She scrambled out of bed and checked the ceiling. No leak, no storm damage. The window was locked, but the trail of water led to the intercom, still dark, still unplugged. And on the floor beneath it, a single sodden school ribbon.
the exact kind her school used. Same color, same fold. But she hadn't worn one in over a decade. She picked it up with trembling hands. The knot was still damp, still warm. She visited her old school the next day. It took hours of convincing to let her inside. The guard at the gate was skeptical, but her name on the alumni list helped. She wandered through the courtyard, past the worn flagpoles and fading murals. Everything was smaller than she remembered, but the fifth-floor stairwell, that was the same. Untouched, heavy with silence. The students avoided it, she noticed that. They walked past it quickly, not meeting her eyes as they passed. She climbed the stairs alone. At the top landing, a metal plaque hung crooked on the wall. It read, "In memory of a life too short to bloom." No name, just dried wax stains on the floor where candles had once been lit. She crouched beside it. Her fingers brushed the tile. Cold. A whisper seemed to rise from the concrete, or maybe just her memory. She jumped from here, Pim had said. 5th floor. She tried to picture the girl, her face, her voice, but nothing came. Just static. Just a fog in the shape of someone almost remembered. When Neera returned home, something was wrong. The door to Unit 5C was unlocked. She was certain she had bolted it. Inside, nothing had been stolen, but something had changed. The mirror on the hallway wall, the one she had turned, was now facing forward again. And in the reflection, just for a split second, she saw 2 of herself, standing side by side. Only one of them blinked. She ripped the mirror down and left it outside by the trash chute. She burned more incense. She played chanting music all night. But still, at 2:13 a.m., the intercom came to life, and the voice this time didn't ask to come in. It simply said, "You're not her. You took her name. You live in her place. You don't remember, but I do." The next day, Neera looked up her birth records, online through the government registry. Her ID, passport, driver's license, all listed her name, Neera Sangpham, but her birth certificate was missing from the database. She tried to contact the municipal office. They put her on hold, then transferred her, then disconnected the call. She tried again. This time, a woman answered in a flat tone. "We have no record of that name born in that year." "But that's me," Neera said. "I've lived here all my life." Silence. Then the woman said, "Are you sure?" Neera stood in front of the bathroom mirror that night, towel removed. She forced herself to look directly into her own eyes. "Say your name," she whispered. Her reflection stared back. "Say it." Nothing. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Her throat constricted. Her chest trembled. She pressed her hands to the glass. The reflection smiled. Not her smile. Wider. Crooked. And whispered, "I'm the real one. You're just the echo." The memory of the stairwell at her old school clung to Neera like a cold film on her skin. She couldn't shake it, couldn't stop hearing the echo of quiet footsteps climbing toward her in her dreams. Every time she blinked, she saw the crooked memorial plaque, the stains from melted candles, the place where someone's life had ended. Someone with her name. Someone who wore her face. Someone she could not remember or refuse to. She had to know more. She logged onto old forums, digging through abandoned threads, rumors, superstitions. Most posts were vague, passed along like ghost stories told behind locker doors. But one message stood out, nearly a decade old. The girl from 5th floor wasn't suicidal. She was erased. No details, no username attached, just that one sentence, erased. The words stuck in her mind like a splinter. She found an old yearbook in an online marketplace. The seller was from a neighboring district. When she messaged him, he replied instantly, almost too quickly, and shipped it the same day, as if he had been waiting for someone to ask. When the package arrived, her hands shook opening it. The book smelled of damp paper and incense, pages yellowed, corners bent. She flipped through class photos. There she was, and there, another version of her. Same name, same uniform, same year. 2 Neras, but only one looked back at the camera. The other girl's eyes seemed to be looking past it, into something deeper, somewhere else. Under her picture, a thin gray line crossed out her name. No replacement, just a smudged mark, as if someone had tried and failed to erase her completely. A prickling sensation crawled up Nira's spine. She closed the book. Was she losing her mind? No, something was wrong with reality, not just her memory. She needed answers from someone who had been there, someone who remembered. She messaged Pim again, asking to meet. Pim agreed, too quickly. Her tone in the call had been cheerful, but there was something forced in her voice, as if she were hiding something, as if she already knew what Nira was going to ask. They met at a quiet noodle shop near the old school. Pim was older, but still recognizable, the same bright smile, the same restless energy. She hugged Nira tightly, almost too tightly. "It's been a forever. You look different." "Different how?" Pim hesitated. "Like you've come back from somewhere." They talked about harmless things first, jobs, family, life in the city. But eventually, the conversation drifted to the past. "Do you remember the girl who died?" Nira asked. Pim's chopsticks froze mid-air. A long pause. Then softly, "You really don't remember, do you?" Nira frowned. "Remember what?" Pim set her bowl down with trembling hands. "We weren't supposed to talk about her. The teacher said it would bring bad luck. But she was in our class. We all knew her. She looked just like you. Sometimes the teachers called you by her name, or her by yours. It was confusing. They said it was just a coincidence, but it didn't feel like coincidence. It felt wrong, like one of you was a copy of the other." Nira's stomach twisted. "What was she like?" "Quiet," Pim said. "Too quiet. Always looking out the window like she was listening for someone. After she died, weird things started happening. Voices, reflections speaking when no one did, students hearing their names called from empty hallways. People said she wasn't gone, just stuck." Pim leaned in, whispering now. "The teachers tried a ritual. A monk came. They burned her belongings, scratched her name off every record. They said it was to release her spirit. But I think," she swallowed hard, "I think they were trying to erase her." Erase her. The word again. Why? Because she kept coming back. Pim's voice trembled. "Everyone said if you heard her knock, you had to let her in. If you didn't, she'd take your name instead. Take your name? Take your life. Neera's blood ran cold. What do you mean? She stared at her with wide, fearful eyes. She asked for help. She begged to come inside, but nobody opened the door. So she made a promise. If she died alone, nobody else would get to live as her. A long silence hung between them. Finally, Pim whispered the words Neera didn't want to hear. You're not the original. Neera's breath caught. You're the one they made to replace her. The restaurant felt suddenly colder. Neera's pulse pounded in her ears. That's ridiculous. I've always been me. Have you? Pim said quietly. Have you really? Think about it, Neera. Can you remember your childhood clearly? Your early memories, are they real? Or do they feel like stories someone once told you? Neera opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She tried to recall simple things, her first day of school, a birthday, a family vacation. Fragments surfaced, but they were hazy, faded, missing edges, like old photos overexposed to sunlight, blurry, incomplete, like someone had rewritten them. Pim reached across the table and took her hand. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew the day you moved into that apartment. Which apartment? Pim's eyes filled with tears. Unit 5C. Neera froze. Why? Because that's where she lived when she jumped. The world tilted. The sound of traffic outside warped into a low hum. Neera felt the room stretch around her, like reality was pulling away in thin strands. She whispered, "Why would I move into her apartment?" Pim's voice was barely audible. Maybe you didn't choose it. Maybe you were led there. That night, back in Unit 5C, Neera stood in the center of the room. Everything was painfully quiet. She ran her hands along the walls, feeling for something, anything that might prove this wasn't real. But the walls were cold, unresponsive, unforgiving. She approached the intercom. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt something else, grief. She pressed her palm against the screen. A faint warmth pulsed beneath it, like a heartbeat. And from deep inside the speaker, a voice whispered softly, gently, "You took my name. You live my life. You sleep in my room. But you never remembered me." The air grew icy. The lights flickered. And in the reflection of the black screen, Neera didn't see herself. She saw the girl in the rain, smiling. The next night, Neera didn't light the incense. She didn't play soft music, didn't chant prayers she didn't believe in. She simply sat on the floor in silence, facing the door, waiting. The clock on the wall ticked like a heartbeat, marking each passing second. The hour felt stretched, like time was holding its breath. And then, 2:13 a.m., the intercom glowed to life. She didn't flinch. The screen hummed. Static danced across the display. And then the girl appeared again, standing outside the door. But this time, something had changed. She wasn't just soaked with rain. She was shaking. Her shoulders trembled. Her arms hung stiff at her sides. Her head was still bowed, but there was something off in the way she stood, like her body no longer belonged to her, like she was wearing it badly. The buzz came, low and sharp.
Mira rose to her feet. She walked slowly to the intercom. The girl didn't move. The audio hissed alive. But the voice that came through wasn't pleading this time. It was angry, not loud, but broken, wet. You let me fall. You watched. You stood there, and you let me die. Nira's breath caught in her throat. No, I didn't. I don't remember. That's the problem. You were supposed to. Suddenly, the screen blinked black, and then, bang, bang, bang! The front door shook with 3 violent knocks. Not hesitant, not ghostly, real, forceful, from the other side. Nira backed away. The handle rattled, but the chain lock held. Still shaking, she crept forward and looked through the pee-hole. Empty. Just the hallway. Still. Dim. No one there. But when she turned away, the door creaked open behind her. Chain still latched. Deadbolt still in place. But the door had opened itself just an inch. Wide enough to let in cold air. Or something else. The next morning, she visited the building's front office. The woman at the desk barely looked up. I need to see the hallway security footage, Nira said. The woman didn't blink. There are no cameras on the 5th floor. There used to be. They were removed. Why? Because no one could explain what they recorded. Nira stood there, silent, waiting. Finally, the woman looked up. Her eyes were hollow. If someone knocks, Miss, you're not supposed to open the door. Why? Because she remembers who didn't. That night, Nira bolted the door and placed heavy furniture in front of it. Chairs, bookshelves, her desk. She unplugged the intercom again, removed the entire wall panel, left the wires dangling like veins. Still, at 2:13 a.m., the screen lit up. Still, the hallway feed came alive. Still, the girl stood there. And this time, she wasn't alone. Another figure flickered into frame, faint, blurred. A shadow standing directly behind her, tall, smiling. It placed a hand on her shoulder, and in a jerky, unnatural motion, she turned her head to the camera. For the first time, Nira saw her full face, and for the first time, she screamed. Because it was her. Not similar, not close. It was her. Her exact face, but drowned, bloated, blue-lipped, eyes open, mouth slightly parted in a permanent breath that had never finished. The screen cut out. The lights in the apartment surged. The incense tray shattered on the floor by itself, and all at once she felt something move through her, not over her, through her. A coldness that slid behind her eyes and pressed against the inside of her skull, like someone had walked through her body and paused to look around. She collapsed to the floor, gasping. When she crawled toward the mirror, now covered again, she pulled back the towel, and what looked back at her was smiling. The next morning, the old woman was waiting outside her door. Nira opened it slowly. The woman handed her a folded paper, yellowed, handwritten. It was a ritual, old, simple, faint ink. A protection charm meant to seal wandering spirits from entering a living body. Nira stared at the steps. 5 candles, white. Ash from a lotus burned during the waxing moon. Salt water. And a mirror. Not any mirror.
A bone mirror, made from cremated remains. "Where do I find that?" Nira asked. The old woman looked at her with pity. "You already did. It's in the wall." That evening, Nira began carrying through the apartment. She knocked along every panel, every shelf, and behind a false wall in the back closet, she found a sealed wooden box wrapped in rotting silk. Inside, a mirror, framed in bone, smooth, cold, and covered in soot. She touched the glass. It was warm, and her reflection was crying, even though she wasn't.
The bone mirror sat on the table like a wound that refused to close. Its frame, curved and pale, was smooth to the touch, too smooth. Polished by time, by fire, by fingers no longer living. It smelled faintly of earth and ash, though no dust clung to it. Nira stared into it. Her own face stared back, but her reflection was wrong, just slightly. Not in the eyes or the mouth, but in something deeper. An expression that didn't match the thoughts in her head, like someone else was practicing her movements. She opened the folded paper the old woman had given her. The instructions were brief, cryptic. To stop the echo, burn lotus ash at the door. Place 5 white candles for the 5 names. Reflect what she remembers. Seal what she cannot speak. Below it, a hand-drawn diagram, a doorway with 5 small flames arranged like a star, and a mirror angled outward, facing away from the home. There was one final line at the bottom, scrawled in fainter ink. "Do not face the mirror inward. If you see her eyes, she will never leave." The old woman was gone. No one answered when Nira knocked on the unit across the hall. No lights, no sound, no trace of her ever having lived there. She asked the building manager. "There's no record of anyone renting that apartment for over 10 years, he said. "I think you're mistaken." That evening, Nira lit the candles. She found dried lotus petals at a nearby flower shop, burned them over a stove until they turned to fine gray dust. She smeared the ash along the edges of the doorway. The mirror she placed facing outward as instructed. But before she did, she held it in both hands and whispered, "I remember you. I don't know how. I don't know why. But I remember the weight of your silence. And I'm sorry I didn't open the door." The room grew cold, not suddenly, but like a tide rolling in. She stepped back. The candles flickered violently, though there was no wind, and the mirror's surface rippled just once, like water. A breath, not hers, exhaled into the silence, then all the flames blew out at once. That night, Nira didn't sleep. She sat on the floor near the door, watching the mirror, the unlit candles, the line of ash. Everything stayed still. But her phone, left untouched on the counter, began to vibrate. No call, no message, just buzzing. Constant. When she picked it up, the screen was black, but her voice came through the speaker. Not a recording. Live. Distorted. "Let me in. It's cold here. You don't know what they did to me." She dropped the phone. It cracked against the floor, but the voice continued. "They took my name, burned my books, scratched me from the walls, and you wore my shadow." She screamed, "Stop it! I didn't choose this!" But the voice only laughed, a sound that didn't belong in the living world. "You didn't choose anything. You were born from what was left of me. You live in a body that was meant to die." The lights in the apartment flared, then went out.
Nira stumbled backward, knocking over the incense tray. Ash scattered across the floor, and then the door creaked open. Just a crack. The mirror fell down, face down, and everything went quiet. She held her breath, listened. Then a single footstep inside the room. She turned, and in the dark, just behind her, stood a silhouette. Not wet, not weeping, still, as if waiting. The figure took one step forward. The lights flickered back on, but the room was empty. The next morning, Nira found something inside the wall, in the vent behind the hallway mirror she had torn down. A small box, wrapped in old cloth. She opened it slowly, expecting bones or hair or teeth, but what she found was worse. Offerings, rotting, a mold-blackened banana, a bundle of red string, a school ribbon frayed and stiff, a folded piece of paper with her name written over and over in different handwriting, thousands of times, as if someone had tried to write her into existence or back from death. There was one more thing inside, a tooth, human, cracked, still stained with blood that hadn't dried. She burned the offerings, every piece, in the sink. The smell was unbearable, sweet and sour and wrong. She opened every window and gagged as smoke poured out. But the fire didn't feel cleansing. It felt like betrayal, like something inside her had been set alight. That night, Nira didn't wait for 2:13. She began the ritual early. Candles, ash, salt water, mirror angled outward. She chanted what little she could remember from the note. She begged forgiveness. She whispered every version of her name she could recall. The air thickened. The candles flickered sideways, not up. The mirror began to glow faintly. She reached toward it, and a hand reached back from the glass, pale, slim, soaked in rainwater. Fingertips pressed to hers, and a voice, no louder than breath, whispered, "Now you remember me." The mirror shattered, and Nira collapsed. When she woke, morning light filled the room. The mirror was in pieces. The candles were melted down to nothing, and her name was no longer written on the mailbox, just a blank plate, scratched, as if it had been removed. She went to the front desk. The manager blinked at her. "Unit 5C? That unit is vacant. No one's rented it in over 10 years. The world felt thinner when she stepped outside. Sounds were muted. Colors were dull. People moved like distant shapes behind glass, their voices muffled as though she no longer belonged to the same layer of reality. Nira stood in the lobby of the building, staring at the blank metal plate where her name used to be. The building manager waited patiently behind the front desk, confused but polite. "What do you mean the apartment is vacant?" Nira asked, her voice calm, too calm. The manager tilted his head slowly. "Miss, Unit 5C has been sealed for years." Nira's lips trembled. "I'm living in it." The manager blinked, twice. "No one lives there. The door is locked. Has always been locked." She stared at him, waiting for the joke. But there was no humor in his eyes. Nothing in his expression suggested he was lying. He looked nervous, as if even speaking about the unit made him uneasy. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she stepped into the elevator. Floor 5. The doors slid open. The hallway stretched before her, long, silent, pale under the fluorescent lights. Her feet felt heavy as she approached the door to her apartment, Unit 5C. She reached for the handle. Locked. The key she had used every day for weeks slid into the lock and did nothing. It didn't even turn, like it belonged to a completely different door. She stepped back, breath shaky. Then she noticed something else. The door wasn't dusty. It was clean, too clean, as if wiped down recently. But the gap at the bottom was sealed shut with a strip of aged paper covered in faded Thai script, a warding seal, a spiritual lock, the kind used to trap something inside. Her chest tightened. She hadn't broken the seal when she moved in. It hadn't even been there. Or had it? Maybe she just never saw it. Maybe someone had replaced it after she entered. Or maybe reality had rewritten itself to show her the truth, that she was never supposed to be inside, that someone else still was. The elevator dinged softly behind her. She turned. The old woman stood there, silent. Her expression was sad, tired. "You shouldn't have come back," the old woman whispered. "Tell me what's happening," Neera said. "Please." The old woman hesitated, then motioned for her to follow. They walked down the hallway in uneasy silence. The old woman unlocked her door with trembling hands. Inside, her apartment was dim, filled with the scent of sandalwood and wilted jasmine. Tiny altars lined the walls, each with offerings, candles, old photographs. Some of those photographs held faces Neera recognized. Former classmates, teachers, residents of the building. And in the center of them all, a picture of her. No, not her. The other one. The girl in the rain. Same face, same name, but empty eyes. Eyes that had seen the bottom of the stairwell. The old woman spoke softly, almost chanting. She died on a night like this. The teachers tried to hide it. They locked the doors, washed the floors, burned her things. They said if the living forget, the spirit will fade. But she didn't fade. She waited, she knocked, she called out. They ignored her. So she found another way. Neera's voice trembled. "What way?" The old woman looked at her with grief in her eyes. "You." "Me?" "You have her name, her memories, her face, but you don't remember the pain. That was the price." A chilling silence filled the room. The old woman approached her slowly, placing a withered hand over Neera's chest. "She didn't enter you. You were built around what she left behind, a body formed from stolen prayers, a life shaped from forgotten echoes. You are not the imposter. You are the continuation." Neera stepped back, heart racing. She couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. "If I'm her, then who is the one calling me?" The old woman's eyes darkened. The part that was left behind, the pain they refused to bury, the memory they erased to make room for you. Neera clutched her head. "This is impossible." The old woman shook her head slowly. "This is Asia. Impossible things happen when the dead are not at peace." Silence. Then the old woman whispered one final truth. "She does not hate you. She just wants to be whole again." Neera's hands trembled. "Then let her in." The old woman's eyes widened in fear. "Do not say that. If she enters you, she won't leave. You will vanish. You will become the memory, and she will wear your body like you once wore hers." Nira's voice broke. "Then what am I supposed to do?" The old woman placed a small bundle in her hands. Dried lotus, red string, a candle, a small bone fragment. You must finish what they refused to do. You must lay her to rest. You must return her name. Name. The word struck like thunder. Her pulse raced. What name? The old woman stared deep into her eyes. Not the name they gave her. The name she carried before they erased her. The name she whispered as she fell. The candles on the altars flickered once. A gust of cold wind swept through the room, and from somewhere, deep in the walls, a voice wept. Faint, broken, familiar. "Let me in. Please. Let me remember. Let me exist." Nira swallowed. Her voice was barely a breath. "What is her real name?" The old woman closed her eyes, listened, and whispered, "Yours."
Nira stood before the door to Unit 5C once again, but now she couldn't tell if she was standing outside or if she had never left. The lock no longer worked. The key, now rusted and bent, slipped uselessly in her pocket. Her name was gone from the tenant registry. Her lease, once printed and signed, had vanished from her email inbox. Even her utility bills now came with no address, just the word, unlisted. She returned to the building's front office. A new receptionist sat behind the desk, a man with gray temples and eyes too tired for his age. She asked him calmly, "Who lived in Unit 5C before me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pushed a binder across the counter. Old, faded, records in plastic sleeves. Nira flipped through them, pages of tenant names and ID numbers. Most were marked moved out, relocated, or expired. When she reached the section labeled 5th floor, her fingers froze. Unit 5A, 5B, 5D, 5E, but no 5C. It had been skipped or erased. The man spoke without looking up. That unit was sealed 10 years ago. Why? His voice dropped. Someone died there. A girl. She jumped from her school, then came home, and he stopped. She killed herself inside the unit? No, that's the thing. She died before she ever came back, but something else did. Nira stared at him, trembling. And then they closed the unit, scratched it from the registry, thought it would stop the knockings. Did it? The man looked at her for the first time. His expression softened. Are you hearing them too? That night, Nira stood in the hallway outside Unit 5C and placed her palm against the door. The surface was colder than it should have been. Beneath her skin, something pulsed, like a slow, deliberate heartbeat from the other side. She whispered, "What are you?" And the door whispered back, "Who are you?" She broke the seal. Hands trembling, she peeled back the warding paper at the bottom of the door. It came off like old skin, brittle, crumbling. And when she turned the knob, the door swung open without resistance. The apartment was dark, but not empty. Everything was exactly as she remembered it. Her shoes by the wall, her jacket on the chair, her cup still half full on the counter, as if she'd never left, as if she never could. But there was one difference. The mirror she had broken was whole again, and someone was standing in it. She stepped inside. The air was damp,
The lights didn't respond, but the intercom was glowing, pulsing faintly like a dying star. And from inside the bathroom, water dripped, a slow, deliberate rhythm. She followed the sound. The tub was full, overflowing slightly. Dark water, almost black, reflected the light from the hallway. And floating just beneath the surface, a ribbon, the same school ribbon. Her fingers reached toward it, but before she touched it, she saw something else in the reflection. A face, not behind her, beneath her, eyes open, staring up from the water. Her own face, lips parted, whispering, "Let me up, let me in, let me be you again." She screamed and stumbled backward. The mirror in the hallway shattered, though no one had touched it. The door slammed shut behind her, and in the silence that followed, a second voice whispered back, not from the intercom, from inside her chest, "You are me. You've always been me. You just forgot which one of us stayed." Nira fell to her knees. Tears streamed down her face. Her hands clutched her own skin as if trying to prove she still belonged to herself. But her memories were slipping. The smell of the incense, the shape of her childhood room, the sound of her mother's voice, all of it began to rot at the edges, like old photographs left too long in the sun. She crawled to the living room, desperate to find something, anything that grounded her. Her ID card, gone. Her phone, blank. No contacts, no call history, no photos, as if she had never lived. Then she remembered the envelope, the one the old woman had slipped under her door the night before. She pulled it from her bag and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, written in shaky hand, "If the world forgets you, you must remember yourself first, or she will become the one who's real." And beneath it, a question scrawled in red ink. "Which Nira are you?" The apartment groaned. The walls pulsed. The floor beneath her feet felt soft, like wet earth. From every corner, whispers rose. They said her name again and again, softly, pleading, but each voice pronounced it differently. Each voice belonged to a girl who might have been her, or wasn't. One voice wept, one laughed, one chanted, and one simply breathed. She staggered to the door, but it was gone. No frame, no hinges, just a smooth wall. The apartment had become a box, a tomb, or perhaps a womb. A place something had been waiting to be reborn. She screamed, louder than she ever had in her life, and from the shattered mirror, her reflection answered, "Finally, now we can begin." The air inside Unit 5C was no longer air. It was something heavier, thicker, something that clung to her skin and pressed against her lungs with every breath. She had no idea how long she'd been inside. The clocks had stopped. The light outside the windows never changed. Day refused to come. Night refused to leave. This was a place sealed from time, and she was no longer sure she'd ever lived anywhere else. In the center of the living room, she drew the circle again. Salt, lotus ash, red string. She placed 4 white candles at 4 points of the compass, north, south, east, west, just as the ritual demanded. She had done this before. She had followed every step, except for one, the 5th candle, the one that didn't represent direction, but origin, the candle that stood for the name, the real name, the forgotten one. And she didn't have it, not fully, not yet. The apartment murmured around her, not voices, not footsteps, but a deep vibration, like the heartbeat of the place itself, like the walls were breathing, waiting. She lit the 4 candles. They flickered violently as if resisting the flame. Still, they held. She knelt in the center, placed the mirror, what was left of it, facing the sealed doorway, and then she waited. At 2:13 a.m., the lights went out. The candles turned blue, and the whispers began again. This time, not outside, from inside the room, all around her. The same phrase again and again, spoken by dozens of voices in unison. Let her in. Let her in. Let her in. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the final item, a small bone-white candle, the 5th. She hesitated, because she knew what it meant. Lighting it would not protect her. It would not banish the spirit. It would open the door. Not just the physical one, but the one inside her, the place the other Nira had been buried, hidden, forgotten. And if she failed to close it again, she wouldn't come out whole, if she came out at all. She struck the match. The wick caught. The 5th flame came alive, and the air went still. Everything, every sound, every whisper, every creak, stopped. Only the flame moved now. And then, slowly, from the far side of the room, the girl appeared. She stepped forward, barefoot, wearing the school uniform, soaked in water that dripped onto the wooden floor, though no rain had fallen in days. Her hair hung over her face like curtains drawn across a window, and when she lifted her head, it was Nira's face, but softer, sad, not angry, not anymore, just empty. The girl keeled across the circle. The 5th candle flickered, and she spoke. You took my name. Nira nodded. I didn't mean to. You lived. I didn't. Nira's eyes filled with tears. Then take it back. The girl tilted her head. It's not that simple. We shared the same shape, but only one of us was meant to remember. You got the life. I got the silence. The flames around them dimmed, the walls groaned, and the girl reached out her hand, palm open, waiting. Say it, she whispered. Say the name they tried to bury. Say it, and I'll go. Nira's mouth opened, but no words came out. Not yet. Her heart pounded, her throat clenched, because deep down she knew it wasn't about remembering her name. It was about surrendering her own. If she gave it, she might disappear. But if she didn't, they'd both stay trapped. The girl's hand remained outstretched. The candles wavered. The 5th flame began to shrink. Say it, she pleaded. Please. Nira reached out her hand and whispered, You are Nira. The flame vanished. The girl smiled. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she began to fade. Not vanish, release, like dust finally given permission to scatter. Nira collapsed as the room fell silent. The candles all extinguished at once. The air cleared, and for the first time in days, she could breathe again. When she woke, it was morning, real morning. Sunlight poured through the windows. The apartment was still, quiet, ordinary. She stood slowly and walked to the mirror. Her reflection looked back. No flicker, no delay, just her. And for the first time, she said her name out loud, Nira. And the mirror did not answer. 3 days passed. And for the first time in weeks, Nira began to feel human again. The air in Unit 5C no longer pressed against her lungs. The shadows no longer moved. The intercom remained dark, and each night she lit a single white candle, not for ritual, but remembrance, not out of fear, but respect. She kept the broken mirror in a drawer. She kept the fifth candle stub, wax hardened around a single charred wick, beside her bed. The haunting, it seemed, had ended. But something still didn't sit right. Not quite. It began with her laptop. She hadn't opened it since before the ritual. Too afraid, maybe. But now, with clarity returning, she dared. She opened her editing software, instinctively returning to her last project, a wedding video she'd been working on before everything began. She scrubbed through the footage. Laughter, vows, dancing. But then, at the 2-minute mark, the image jumped. Just one frame. A glitch. A smear of static. And in that flicker, a figure in the background. Too quick to make out. She rewound, slowed the frame, and saw her, the girl in the rain, in a wedding video she had never been part of. Her heart pounded. She opened other projects, old ones, archived files, birthday reels, graduation clips for travel vloggers she barely remembered. And in every single one frame, one flicker, always at 2:13 on the timeline, there she was, sometimes behind glass, sometimes in mirrors, sometimes standing completely still in the background, just blurred enough to be missed by anyone not looking. But now Neera was looking, and she couldn't look away. She checked the audio tracks next. On one, the waveform appeared normal. But when she isolated the background channels, a voice, soft, low, almost buried beneath the music. I am the echo that lived in your silence. She played it backward. The words became clearer. You are the one who forgot me, and I am the one they'll remember. Neera slammed the laptop shut. Her hands were shaking again, because this wasn't the past resurfacing. This was now. Something still lingered. Not outside, inside the tools she used, inside the systems that played back time. The ghost hadn't vanished. It had evolved. She visited a data recovery center the next day, pretended she was just a filmmaker who suspected corrupted files. The technician, a man in his 30s with kind eyes, agreed to run a diagnostic. He promised to email her a full report. That evening, his message arrived early. No subject, just a single line. Why is your voice saying things you didn't record? Neera replied instantly. What do you mean? No answer. She tried calling. Disconnected. She searched for the email account. Deleted. Back at home, she opened the raw audio files manually. She focused on the clips where she had recorded voiceovers, tutorials, narration, wedding speeches. Every clip was clean, except one. A file labeled VO Final March. She didn't remember recording anything in March. She opened it. Static. Then a whisper. Her own voice. But she never said these words. You are the memory that walked too far. The shape that learned how to speak. But a voice isn't a soul. And a face isn't a name. And silence, followed by a sound like something being dragged. Wet. Scraping. Then Let me show you what it feels like to be remembered the wrong way. The playback stopped on its own, and the intercom buzzed. Neera jumped. She stared at it. Unplugged, still glowing, still alive. But this time, the feed didn't show the hallway. It showed her, standing in her own apartment, from above, as if the camera was now inside, watching, recording, waiting. She backed away, heart racing. The screen crackled, and a new voice came through. Not hers, not the girl's. Something deeper, older, like a voice from inside the wires. You burned her name, but not her story. And stories always want to be told. The screen went black, the laptop shut down, and in the silence, her phone vibrated once. A notification from her editing app. New project created. She hadn't touched it. She opened it anyway. The title, Neera Final Edit. Inside were clips, all recent, all filmed from impossible angles. Her brushing her teeth, sleeping, speaking to no one, crying in her sleep. One clip showed her standing by the door at exactly 2:13 a.m., but she had no memory of it. Another clip showed her answering the intercom, smiling, welcoming something in, and whispering, "You can have it now." She slammed the screen shut, but the audio played on. Let me be the version they can't erase. Let me become what they fear remembering. Neera crawled to the corner of the room and covered her ears. She was shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear of being haunted. It was fear of being replaced. That even now, she wasn't the one inside the skin. That someone else was speaking through her mouth, wearing her voice, stepping into her shadow. And as the candle by her bed slowly went out, the screen lit up again, showing her reflection, smiling, mouthing 3 words. You're almost done.
Neera didn't sleep that night. She sat on the floor beside the shattered mirror fragments, her knees pulled to her chest, eyes red, throat sore from screaming, but no one had heard. She hadn't tried calling for help. She knew it wouldn't work. Whatever was happening now wasn't happening in the world everyone else lived in. It was only happening here, in Unit 5C, in her. She relit the 5th candle, watched its pale flame flicker in the darkness like a final heartbeat. She needed to know what the haunting really was. Not the rituals, not the curses, not the words people passed around in whispers, but the truth underneath the haunting, the core of it. And the mirror, what was left of it, was the only thing that still felt connected to that truth. She returned to the closet, the hidden compartment behind the wall, where she had first found the bone mirror, sealed in cloth, framed in the ashes of someone long dead. She had left it there, afraid. But now her hands were steady. This time she took the whole box out, carried it into the center of the room, opened it again. Inside, the mirror had healed. No cracks, no scorch marks. The surface was perfect, waiting. She positioned it upright, careful to face it away from her, remembering the old woman's warning. Do not face the mirror inward. If you see her eyes, she will never leave. But Neera no longer believed she had a choice, not anymore. So she turned the mirror, slowly, toward herself. Her reflection didn't appear right away. First there was darkness, then movement, and then her face.
but not hers. Younger, paler, eyes dark and bottomless, like they had stared at death too long. And the mouth, smiling, not wide, not sharp, just enough to say, "Welcome back." The voice came before her lips moved. "You remember now, don't you?" Neera swallowed. "I don't know who I am anymore." The reflection nodded. "Because you were built from silence, formed from forgetting. You were the space where I should have lived. You were permission." The candle beside the mirror pulsed, and the mirror's surface rippled, like water disturbed by something rising beneath. And then the bones began to whisper. Neera could hear it in the frame. Faint, dry voices, chanting in an ancient dialect she didn't understand, but somehow felt. And language older than the building, older than Bangkok, older even than the name Neera. The mirror showed more now. Not just her. Scenes. Moments she had never lived but recognized. A school staircase. A girl running in the rain. A shrine covered in offerings. A teacher pulling a name off the wall. A mother burning a photo. A younger version of her sitting alone in a classroom while others pretended she didn't exist. And then, the moment of the fall. The 5th floor, rain pouring, the scream that never escaped her lips, her body collapsing in silence, her soul standing still, watching it all. "You were made from what they couldn't face," the mirror said. "And now they've forgotten me completely, except you. You are the last one who remembers, and when the last one forgets, the ghost becomes the truth." Neera gripped the edges of the mirror. Her fingers burned, but she didn't let go. "What do you want from me?" The mirror blinked, and in her voice it said, "I want your place." The room around her twisted, walls stretched, then vanished. She was in a dark corridor now, alone. Endless mirrors lining either side, each showing a different version of herself. Some smiling, some crying, some standing perfectly still, unblinking. And one mirror at the very end was empty, waiting. She stepped toward it. Each footstep echoed with impossible depth. She reached the end, stood before the empty frame, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, a hand reached through. Fingers touched hers, and a voice said, "This is where I step through. This is the trade. You lived long enough. Let me finish the story." Neera whispered, "Will I disappear?" The voice responded, "Only if you stop remembering. Only if you give me everything." She stared into the void of the mirror, then reached into her pocket. She still had it, the torn photo, the class picture from years ago, the one where she didn't know which girl was her. She held it against the mirror. It began to burn. The mirror shimmered, and her reflection wept. Suddenly, the voices inside the mirror screamed, not words, refusal. The trade was not complete. The ghost wanted more, not just a name, not just a face, but a life. Neera stepped back. The mirror cracked, a fine web of fracture spreading across its surface. One more whisper came through. "Please, let me be real." She picked up the bone frame and turned it, away from herself, back to the door, back to the place she had first summoned the dead. And in one motion, she threw the mirror down. It shattered completely. The bones splintered. The chant stopped. The room fell silent. She collapsed to the floor, breathing, alive, still herself. When she looked up, the walls were intact, the lights were warm, the intercom was dark, the apartment still. And on the floor, where the mirror had broken, nothing remained. No glass, no frame, no bone, no ashes, as if it had never existed. But in the quiet, she knew better. Some hauntings don't linger in rooms. They linger in reflections, in memories, in files you never opened, in names you don't remember choosing, and in mirrors you shouldn't have looked too long into, because the girl was never just a ghost. She was a story, one the world tried to erase. But stories don't die. They wait until someone remembers.
For a while, it seemed over. No voices, no whispers, no static at 2:13 a.m. The apartment felt empty in the way it should have from the beginning. No presence, no pressure, no unseen weight resting in corners. And yet, Nira knew it wasn't finished. Not really. Because the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like pause, the calm between breaths, the moment before the next word. She lit incense again, even though she no longer believed in rituals. Not exactly. But belief wasn't what mattered. Memory was. And memory had a way of curling back in on itself. Every time she closed her eyes now, she didn't just see her own life. She saw hers. The girl in the stairwell, the rain on her uniform, the smile that never reached her eyes, the scream that never came out. Nira tried to record herself that night, just to see, to document her sleep, her movements, her breath, to prove she was still the one in her skin. She set up her laptop on the desk, camera facing her bed. She hit record, lay down, waited for sleep, but she never made it. 2:13 a.m., the intercom buzzed one last time. She sat up. The screen glowed, but the image wasn't the hallway. It wasn't the building. It was her room, from above. And she saw herself sleeping, even though she was awake. She saw her body rise, even though she hadn't moved. And she watched, horrified, as her sleeping self walked to the door. The screen pulsed, then went black. And all at once, the mirror, repaired without explanation, lit up across the room. But this time, it didn't show her face. It showed the girl, not crying, not pleading, but staring, still, expectant. The air grew thick. The candles on her altar, all 5 of them relit themselves, flickering, shivering, and the 5th one, representing the forgotten name, burned higher than the rest, a tall flame, blue at its center. Then, the door opened, not by her hand, not by any wind. It simply opened, and someone stepped in, not wet, not weeping, not lost. She stepped through like someone returning to their own home. Her feet didn't leave marks. Her eyes never blinked. But she walked to the center of the apartment where Nira stood frozen and said only one thing. "It's time." Nira couldn't speak. Her body didn't respond. The girl reached into her pocket and pulled out a bundle of red string, lotus ash, 5 wilted petals. She placed them on the floor, candles around them, and looked to Nira. "Light it." Nira's mouth moved. "Why?"
Because if you don't, the story ends without you. Nira lit the match, touched it to the string. It caught, burned quickly. The ash stirred, lifted, swirled in the candlelight, and from that spiral of smoke, a second Nira stepped forward. Same face, same hair, same clothes, but the eyes, empty, glass-like, and she smiled. Finally, she whispered, "We're whole." The girl turned to her, her other self, and held out her hands. We finished the ritual together. Only then does one of us stay. Nira hesitated, but her body moved forward, hand shaking. She reached toward her twin, fingers almost touching, and the flame of the fifth candle exploded. A wind tore through the apartment, ripping salt from the floor, scattering ash like snow. The candles fell, the circle broke, and everything went dark. Nira fell backward, hard. The apartment twisted, walls dissolved into shadow, floor melted into black water, and the mirror, hovering now, reflected every version of her that had ever existed. Hundreds of faces, some crying, some screaming, some watching, silently. The ritual was broken, interrupted, and the girl, no longer separate, stepped into her. Not a possession, a fusion, a folding of lives that were never meant to exist at the same time. And as Nira's knees hit the floor, her eyes filled with tears, not fear, but grief, she whispered, "I remember now. I remember you. And I'm sorry." The wind stopped, the mirror shattered, and in the silence, only one Nira remained, breathing, still, alone. But she no longer knew which one she was. The ritual had failed, or completed, or changed into something else, because there was no more knocking, no more buzzing, no more questions. Just a girl in an apartment, remembering a life that might not be hers. And the final flicker of the fifth candle burned itself out. The apartment is quiet now, still. No wind in the vents, no buzzing from the intercom, no flicker in the lights. It holds a kind of silence that feels like breath held in the lungs of the building. Not peaceful, not hostile, just waiting. Unit 5C has returned to itself. Or perhaps it never really left. Nira doesn't check the mirror anymore. She doesn't listen for the voice behind the walls. She doesn't try to burn incense or chant old names or ask questions she no longer wants answers to. She wakes, she moves, she eats, she edits videos again. And when she speaks, her voice is steady, but a little too even, as if someone has practiced it, as if it's not entirely hers. She still dreams, though, always at the edge of waking. Dreams of stairs, of rain, of standing at a door that never opens. Sometimes in the dream she's outside, begging to be let in. Other times she's inside, refusing to unlock the latch. And once she looked down in the dream and saw her hands covered in ash, the fifth candle burning beside her, burning blue. She walks differently now. People notice. The neighbors don't speak to her, not out of rudeness, out of instinct. Children glance at her, then look away, uneasy. One afternoon, a delivery man dropped off a package, and before she could thank him, he asked, "Didn't someone die in that apartment?" She said nothing, just smiled, and closed the door. The intercom remains unplugged, yet at 2:13 a.m. it always glows, only for a moment, a flicker of light, then darkness again. She doesn't answer anymore. She doesn't need to, because now there's no one left to let in, or perhaps there's no one left outside. There are days when she forgets what started all of this. She forgets who moved in, who was haunted, who was the ghost. Some memories feel like dreams. Others feel like they belong to someone else. And some, like the feel of cold tile under bare feet, or the sound of dripping water behind a closed door, feel too real to forget, too deep, too old, like they've always been hers, even if she was never born to remember them. One night, she opens her laptop. A new file is waiting. She didn't create it. It's named only Nira 2:13 a.m. Final. Inside, there's a single clip, just a few seconds long. No visuals, only audio. She presses play and hears a voice, her voice, soft, whispering, but layered. Two voices speaking in perfect unison. One old, one new, one living, one remembering. And they say, "I was the echo. Now I am the voice. I used to knock. Now I answer." She deletes the file. It returns the next night. She stops trying to remove it. Eventually, she stops noticing it at all. Because some files are meant to stay. Some names are meant to be worn. Some stories, no matter how deeply buried, finish themselves. And if you were to walk past Unit 5C today, you'd hear nothing. You'd see no movement behind the curtains. You'd feel nothing but the weight of silence in your chest. But if you looked closely, really closely, you might see a faint glow from behind the door at 2:13 a.m. every night, without fail. And if you listened hard enough, you'd hear a voice whisper through the wires, "Let me in, let me in, let me in."